here is what's also going on lately in regards to DFFT. And we're going to go ahead and zoom in on this. So I didn't want to get into the full giant outline in regards to, everything that was listed here. But I will jump to the key areas that you need to pay attention to, especially if you have been following the deep dives in regards to data free flow of trust and so on, and why that's a big deal. Not just for Japan, but let's be honest, for the world, right? We talk about that regulatory framework. This is regulatory framework from the ground up. So the key areas here that I want to bring it to you. Key goals to take DFFT from concept to action. At the end of the day, hey, let's address the elephant in the room. Is that going to happen? Right. Check this out. The 2023 G7 ministers meeting provided a conceptual framework. Again, wasn't making that up. To bring DFFT to life with pragmatism. I'm not pronouncing that right. Flexibility and interoperability. I always like how they mention interoperability, and I also like how I tied everything in regards to interoperability. Not intentional, but it does sound pretty good, does it not? Anyway, ministers stated that, quote, trust should be built and realized through various legal and voluntary frameworks, guidelines, standards. And again, guys, I mean, even on the surface, for all the people, especially some of the fudders that I saw who are like, do you have any sources? Sources on what? Future interoperability? Like, that sounds bizarre, Again, like I was mentioning on the example, why would I give anybody a source on, for instance, Project Rosalind? We covered that a while back, or Project Icebreaker, Project Hamilton. All that was speculative, but then it became true. You can't give a source on research of, like, hey, there's probably some NDAs going on here, but you love the terminology that's basically mentioned here. So again, if you're just tuning in, check this out for a moment. All right. For one, interoperability. Number two, what's mentioned here, the standards. All right. When we talk about standards, that's why we always pay attention to certain standards. For over a year and a half now, we've been talking about ISO 222, right? The messaging standard. Quants, Overledger, when it comes to ISO TC 307, the Gilbert-Verdine Quant Network Standard, right? This goes on to mention technologies and other means that are transparent and protect data, right? What's Jasmine trying to do every single day, for crying out loud? Trying to create a real solid utility. It's already there. We just need mass adoption and so on, right? But we need more partnerships. We need more implementation. We need more of that mass adoption. But they are, let's face it, in Japan, probably the biggest proponent of protecting data. Goes on to mention that their goal, as in, what you see here, is to build upon commonalities, complementaries. I'm not even pronounce that right. I apologize. Too much reading today sometimes, and just the words become words. Again, I don't know if you know or you can relate to what I'm talking about. And elements of convergence between existing regulatory approaches and instruments enabling data to flow with trust in order to foster what? Future interoperability. I mean, if anything, if a person just read this and didn't even go on crypto Twitter or anything like that, they could say, could you give me a source on future interoperability? No, you can't give a source on future interoperability, but if anything, you do your proper research, you could tie things in, you could connect the dots just like anybody else. Check this out for a moment. All right, this is good stuff. I jumped to the good parts for you guys. The 2023 annex on the G7 vision for can't pronounce anything tonight. Operationalizing DFFT and its priorities highlighted 4 key issues. And let's bring these 4 key issues. Data localization. Again, guys, when you see this outline, that's why I'm bringing it to you guys. It spells out Jasmy from top to bottom. And if people are still not convinced that it does, then you know what? As the saying goes, you can bring a horse to water, but you can't make it drink, right? Yeah, you can't. But you can, if anything, recognize the research that we've been bringing to you guys for many, many months now. Or if you've been following quant, man, I mean, probably for over a year now. Data localization. Look at this for a second. DFFT should deliver tangible progress in undertaking the economic and societal, can't pronounce that either tonight. I can't pronounce anything tonight. I apologize. Impact of data localization measures while taking into account varied approaches to data governance and legitimate public policy objectives. Another thing I like to point out, when we always reference, Mr. Genki Oda, everything that's mentioned here has Jasmine spelled all over it, like literally like a fat kid on cake. But public policy and those objectives, having a person, like I've always said before, it's not what you know, it's who you know. Genki Oda, JVCEA, he's a decision maker. He's part of that public policy objective. Getting to the next part. Regulatory cooperation, DFFT, should promote work to identify commonalities, pronounce it right this time, my goodness, in regulatory approaches to cross-border data transfers and data protection requirements, as well as facilitate cooperation on privacy-enhancing technologies. Now, before we get more into this, I saw some people from the recorded video saying, Max, should we start treating Jasmy like also, in the realm of like Ripple's XRP? And I don't know if I'm quite ready to go that area, but it seems as though that could be the case. For one, scalability. Number two, not just focusing on the concept of, data democratization, but we know with Jasmine that they're jumped into a whole new spectrum, right? Finance democracy. And they do reference, for instance, consistently this concept of cross-border payments. Yeah, it's stationed in Japan, but they're also looking to bring that more to a broader scale. Now, as far as them doing the amount of volume that like Ripple's XRP would do with banks and so on, that's a different story. However, check this out for a moment. How many times have we referenced Jasmine when it came to the local domestic banks of Japan? So it's not necessarily a case of just cross-border payments. Maybe they do a little bit of that because let's face it, what they're trying to try to accomplish with, the metaverse and so on, to a sense, I mean, you can say that's cross-border, more like it's just, accessing the internet and whatnot. But my key thing is understanding that, local governments, right? It's not necessarily cross-border, but it's, if anything, it's incentivizing a lot of these local governments, local banks, right, to get involved with contributing towards, let's face it, society 5.0, right? And it works in so many different ways. We gave you guys some examples of not just what's going on with Jasmine, but other key players that have, like, for instance, stable coins and so on, and how it doesn't necessarily have to be a digital currency, but you could have a stable coin. Remember, we gave you that example in regards to the airline industry, right? So going more into this, I want to jump down to this. Trusted government access to data. Data free flow of trust should build awareness of the OECD Declaration of Government Access to Personal Data held by private sector entities. And this part is pretty big because some of those private sector entities are going to be heavily involved with who? The likes of who can bring, like, personal data in the form of these lockers and so on and protect it with management, right? You know where I'm going with this. Among these private sector entities and other nations encouraged basically to sign up to its principles, the DFFT Secretariat should develop a shared understanding on the appropriate risk-based approaches for preventing any government to access to personal data that is inconsistent with democratic values and the rule of law, and is unconstrained, unreasonable, arbitrary, or disproportionate. Yeah. What I'm trying to say is this, okay? This has, for instance, blockchain spelled all over it, has DLT spelled all over it. And again, you go back to the root, like, source of, who in Japan is the biggest proponent of all of this. Again, you still have to go back to, hey, it's not rocket science. You go to Jasmine. Why is that? They were also the first to be regulatory compliant with the JVCEA, formerly known as the FSA. So they have more than made, laid down their stamp, if you will, or their stake in all this many years ago. And you consistently building patents and innovating at the same time. Also on top of that, data sharing, right? So eventually, as you guys know, we're going to get to the point where we have that that basically decentralized data marketplace, okay? And how we're disturbing an industry, like I've always said, that really needs to be disturbed, which is the centralized entities, the Googles, the Amazons, you name it. It says COVID-19 and other global issues have demonstrated the value and need for like-minded partners to find consensus on approaches to data. And I want to point this out. Remember how I used all those analogies before about like a Hollywood production? It's not one guy building towards or trying to make a movie, an actor or director, producer, and so on. That's why when you watch the credits at the end of a film, it literally mentions not just a grocery list, but like the grocery list, I mean, it just goes on and on and on. Like, it's just a big, long resume of everybody who's involved with the film. Well, what about a big, long resume of everybody who's involved with this concept? The like-minded partners, right? That's what makes sense. And it says define consensus on approaches to data sharing. Consensus. Think about that for a second. Excuse me. But yeah, approaches to data sharing in priority sectors such as healthcare. Again, let's reference who? Let's reference the CARE project. Who's partnered up with the CARE project? Ripple. Who's also partnered up with the CARE project? Jasmy. Climate technology. Wonder how that's going to work out. Yeah, you know where we're going with that. Climate technology is a big, giant industry in itself, and you better believe it's a key proponent towards this concept of Society 5.0. Mobility. Look at everything that's mentioned here. Autonomous mobile lights. Look what Toyota is trying to accomplish. Look at who Jasmy is partnering with, not necessarily directly with Toyota, but their subsidiaries. A lot of times the fudders still want to mention that. Oh, it's not a direct partnership. Okay. All right. Again, even here in the United States, we understand that sometimes you don't have to have direct partnerships. Like, you don't have to have a direct partnership with Chrysler, but if anything, you have that partnership with a subsidiary. The subsidiary is Mopar, right? Who hasn't used Mopar parts before, is not aware of it, especially in the United States. Going further into it, I love this part. The annex upheld the role of tech and its use cases thereof, such as digital credentials. Look at what Jasmine is trying to accomplish with that. And identities. Again, this has Jasmine written all over it without saying Jasmine. Well, you know what, Max? I can't stand you. You always come up with this stuff and it doesn't say Jasmine. Okay. Well, at least go back to my record when it comes to quant then, if you want to be real finicky. And I did point out many cases where things were speculative and again end up being, oh, that was verified. Yeah, it's been crickets ever since for all those guys, right? And it's going to be crickets even that much more when it comes to this for Jasmine, because it's not rocket science. All you got to do is just do your own research. Hence why we have these shows, DYOR with Max, right? You do your own research, but we do it together, right? It also noted improved data use is a major strategic opportunity for economic growth. Again, guys, for all the people who are flooding Jasmine like all the time, are they not reading this? Major strategic opportunity for economic growth. What's the biggest one that contributes to all these concepts and has all these big connections? And you better believe that they do, because we confirm some of these things. But again, guys, it's not what you know, it's also who you know. Like I've always said, I hope to God they never piss off Genki Yoda, but if they did, I think they're still more than good, because if anything, it doesn't dismiss the what? It doesn't dismiss the utility. says, in that context, the following are specific ideas to take DFFT from concept into action. And this is why I'm bringing it to you guys tonight, because the main reason why I want to bring it to you tonight is because this is a great thing to ask. Everybody wants to, hear all the good news, but it's like, what about the concepts? I mean, these are concepts. Is there any action? Finally, we're getting an example of where we take it to concept into action, kind of like what we talk about with Ripple's XRP and so on, or ISO 222, Stellar, all that, XTC, IOTA, all these ones that are part of it, HBAR, right? Full implementation. When does that happen? Well, this is not a Ripple segment. This is Jasmy. You can see where we're going with this. So let's just do that. Let's jump into this next part real quick. Put DFFT on a firmer footing with an empowered secretariat. I love this. And if anything, hopefully you do appreciate yourself. Let me just double check a couple settings before I get more into this. So it goes into mention DFFT needs institutional support to move discussions from concept to action. Yes, thankfully, and look what's mentioned here, the United States and other G7 members recently endorsed the establishment of the institutional arrangement for partnership, IAP, within the OECD to bring governments and stakeholders together to operationalize DFFT through principles-based, solutions-oriented, evidence-based, multi-stakeholder, and cross-sectoral cooperation. If there's been anybody here who's been following my material for a few months now, remember I said that the United States copied DFFT, and I had some people, and by George, I'm not going to mention who they are because it doesn't matter because I don't want to give recognition to them. But they said I was full of it on that one. They did. They said you are just trying to make something out of nothing. I'll never forget some of these comments saying, how do you know, Max, that the United States copied that? And I said, I read it. And they're like, can you provide any links? I cannot provide any direct links because if anything, it was just simply mentioned, right, in talks with who? Well, I don't know. Some of you guys watch C-SPAN. Some people think it's boring sometimes. But inside of those hearings and so on, they specifically were talking about some of these concepts. And I told you guys for a while now that the United States basically copied it, but they didn't call it DFFT. There is the proof. I don't make stuff up. I'm accused of making stuff up, but there is the proof. I did not make that up, right? So again, you guys, we've all been waiting for this whole concept of when are we going to have regulatory framework before we can get that clarity? Remember how many times I've been pounding this home to you guys about how DFFT is literally that regulatory framework to get toward the clarity? Hopefully now, since I did give you some actual proof on screen to show you this, and again, if people want the source, I'll drop it in the comments. And no, this is not coming from Larry in the comments. This is me. This is me dropping the comment. Okay, because I know the other day people were like, "Hey, Larry, how's it going?" That's not Larry. That's actually me. There's a source. Check it out for yourself. It comes from itif.org, and this is a recent publication. All right, getting more into this. Let me see how we're doing in regards to the likes real quick. We are currently at only 30 likes. We could get some more likes. So getting more into this, it says, for instance, G7 ministers were right in stating that a secretary is needed to operationalize DFFT. There are gaps in international governments to operationalize DFFT. Were you aware of that? And this, of course, is due to cross-sectoral nature, and there is a need for new mechanisms to bring governments and stakeholders together. New mechanisms. Have you understood for a while where we're going with that? I don't need to go more into detail about that. You guys are smart. You know where I'm going with that. The DFFT Secretariat should support targeted and pragmatic discussions between governments. Yes. The goal for Secretariat should be to support government action on foundational issues for global data governance. And you love how this is mentioned, because here's the thing. A lot of people just look at Jasmine as just being like, okay, that's for Japan. But we know that Jasmine's taken it to a whole new, broader perspective, right? We're looking to take this thing worldwide. Yeah, we're focusing a little bit now on what's going on here in the United States and so on. That's awesome, right? Because, last I checked, U.S. ranks third in population behind China, India, and, well, yeah, number 3. But the key thing is global data governance. If you can literally, we talk about Ripple's XRP being the chosen one for cross-border payments and even Stellar, right? But can you imagine how big it would be for Jasmy to be the chosen one when it came to global data governance? This is we talk about a big whopper. And this is why I will always talk about Jasmy, and some people say, oh, of course you're going to talk about Jasmy, that new thing about, being the ambassador. You probably get some tokens. Please. I think I've proven that I would have talked about Jasmy even if I wasn't getting paid. And that's a fact, right? I'm personally heavily invested into Jasmy. We'll talk about, whether that was the case or not. Look at this. Back to global data governance, which could then form the basis for broader discussions at the OECD and elsewhere. The Secretariat should bring in other stakeholders, for instance, industry, civil society, academia. Again, everything that's mentioned here is everything that's part of the Jasmy roadmap. I mean, come on, guys. Think about it. It says where needed, but should primarily be a forum for G7 governments to work together, as otherwise it runs the risk of turning into another unproductive talk shop. Nobody wants that, right? And if anything, you don't see that going on. Terra Luna is going everywhere. So that's not a case of unproductive talk shop. Now, back to G7. Members could designate working level government officials to guide the Secretariat on an ongoing basis to ensure progress and discussions are targeted to what's of interest to respective governments and doesn't just happen, it fits and spurts basically in the lead up to the ministerial meetings. In this way, the Secretariat would provide continuity and permanence for the data free flow with trust initiative and associated discussions, which otherwise wax and wane depending on G7 or even worse, G20 or the hosted country. Now, I'm going to get into all of these things here. All right. I mean, it's good stuff. Again, you're welcome to nerd it out. But one thing I do want to talk about is some of the other areas of the world. All right. So check this out for a brief moment. I know I said it want to make a super long deep dive on it. So I know it's kind of getting into that, but it's good stuff. Once up and running, the IAP should become a leading advocate and educator for the principles, best practices, and initiatives that demonstrate what DFFT. Here's an example. The IAP could work with third world countries to socialize the OECD's trusted access to government principles. The IAP could engage with African Union Secretariat and members, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, which is ASEAN, I guess is how you pronounce it, and other regional groupings to explore how these principles play out among their respective members. These respective regional organizations and their members are all at different stages with this issue, so targeted and tailored IEP engagement would lay the foundation for practices and policies that relate to their respective situations. Bottom line here is this. Even though it doesn't say this, you could apply this, for instance, to like what Stellar is doing, right? Accessing the unaccessed. But if you have a perfect case where you have a global standard, right, especially when it comes to data, then you can apply that to even what, like, that principle of what Stellar is doing, but apply it to Jasmy and now enter it into a whole other continent. That is huge. All right. I like this about the case study real quick. I'm going to jump down to this for a second. This is another part you want to pay attention to. And I know this is a lot of material, but man, is it good material. Check this out. There have been several major developments since Data Free Flow with Trust basically launched all the way back in 2019. Listen to this. These include forthcoming European Union and even US-based data privacy framework. I've been talking about this for many months, and if you guys have been paying attention to it, you know where I'm going with this. And you have, if anything, have appreciated the content because you understand how big that opportunity is. And if anything, when we're looking at some of the recent pullbacks, right, in the market, it seems like everything's going to hell, and we're recognizing, hey, you know what, maybe accumulation phase got a little bit more extended. I still count it as blessings in disguise. Some people think I'm nuts, but you want to know something? It allows me to achieve my goals that I haven't been able to achieve. I achieved it with Jasmine, but there's other key proponents, right? So get more into this. The OECD Declaration on Government Access to what? Personal data held by private sector entities, and the Cloud Act. Think about this, the Cloud Act. So for another, again, if you're losing where I'm at on this, again, guys, look at this. Declaration on government access to what? Personal data held by who? Private sector entities. Why would I highlight this? Because if anything, when we pointed out the whole concept of a decentralized data marketplace, there you go. Because understanding this, you get the government involved in recognizing this. And some people say, oh, I don't want the government involved. If the government's involved, that ruins the whole point of decentralization to a degree. I get where you're coming from. But if you're a Jasmy holder and they're the chosen one for that global data governance, are you going to be complaining too much as a holder? Not really, right? And the Cloud Act, again, Cloud Act, think about this for a second. Agreements between who? The United States. Again, some people say, oh, the United States is not part of this. They're not embracing any of this. Come on. Literally, have you not been following what's been going on with the House and Senate when it comes to these meetings? I've been paying attention to it. Some of you guys have been paying attention to it. Again, our news outlets don't necessarily report some of this. And you guys know that for yourself, right? You guys talk about, like some people say, hey, CNN's fake news, and there's this other one that's fake news, right? Look at the source here. This is a Japanese news publication, different side of the world. Why would a Japanese news publication give a crap about what's reported here in the United States? I mean, maybe they should, but you get where I'm going with that as well. So yes, Cloud Act agreement between the U.S., United Kingdom, and Australia. It also includes the Global CBPR initiative. Australia, Singapore, New Zealand, Chile, and others have also launched, listen to this, digital economy agreements that include regulatory operation and just that, data flows, AI, digital trade. Let's pause there for a moment. So we've been paying close attention to digital trade. We've been paying close attention to what's happening with how the UK literally laid down the framework, if you will, when it comes to digital worldwide trade through the electronics trade documents. What? Bill that became an act written into law by who? Right? Yeah, the king of the UK, right? My dad used to joke around and make fun of his ears, but anyway. But my point is that it will literally go into effect September 20th. Now, that's the UK. What about Japan? Yeah, you better believe Japan laid down the framework for global data governance. You don't think that's a big deal? We talk about, data is the new oil, right? It's the new oil. Remember way back in the days, maybe your grandparents used to talk about this stuff. Who are the guys who literally ruled the world when it came to being the elites, of the early 1900s? Talk about remember Standard Oil? Remember your grandparents, or depending on how old you are, maybe it was your dad, right? Always talk about Standard Oil and how they monopolized everything. But look at what's mentioned here. Could you very well see that we're going into this different shift, a different direction, right? If this is the new oil, we're decentralizing that oil, right? Not making it so there's a monopoly of like Standard Oil, if you will, when it comes to all this. Because technically speaking, if you want to get really, really technical, right? Google, Facebook, now known as Meta, Amazon, those are the Standard Oils of the centralized world of data. Besides these major initiatives, the stock take could investigate smaller scale case studies and pilot projects, countries which have used that, who are also at underlying issues related to the concept of DFFT, such as regulatory cooperation, data exchanges. joint enforcement, investigations, and cross-border research data models. Some potential related ideas, of course, and so on. There's a map in regards to the trusted access. I'm not going to get into that. I mean, it's good stuff, but I mean, you guys will be here for hours. Don't want to get into all that. But what I was going to state is this part about China is basically, you do want to pay attention to this because we know that China is part of BRICS countries. So before we wrap up this Jasmy segment, it says map how China and other countries contravene DFFT, OECD principles for privacy, respecting data flows, and governance. Now, some people are going to say, well, I know how it's going to go. They're going to do 15-minute cities, right? Hear us out on this. So it says the balance in former Japanese Prime Minister Abe's DFFT is a duality. The data flows where they are basically trusted. There is clearly no trust about data flows, obviously, to China. Yeah, no kidding. Policymakers admit behind closed doors that data free flow with trust now is largely defined not by what it is for, but what it is against. For instance, China. Putting this mapping idea on the agenda would finally be saying the quiet part out loud, and in doing so, provide much needed reference material to help firms and regulators understand the risk from excessive and arbitrary government access to data in China and other problematic countries. Right. Think about this. It's not rocket science, guys. If DFFT literally stands for data free flow with what? Trust. How could you trust China to work with that in the same type of, global governance laws and so on? It's not happening. So what would be maybe one area where that would possibly work? Well, basically Hong Kong. And for some people are saying, well, isn't Hong Kong part of mainland China? Well, yeah, it is. But you also got to understand they still kind of operate, not with full control yet, right? You got to keep in mind this is an area that used to be under, the British Empire, the British monarchy, all the way up to 1998. Russia is also mentioned here. The IAP basically should map how countries such as China and even Russia exemplify the counterpoint in terms of how countries actively undermine the principles that make up both DFFT and the OECD trusted government access to data initiatives. Right. Again, I don't see them being trusted. I don't think anybody would really see them trusted. They give an example for this, right? And that basically is that there remains a lack of both transparency and details about how exactly China exercised to broad legal discretion in laws that provide the government to access data. This research should help plug this major gap. For example, this could include research into China's government access to data both domestically and extraterritorially. China's cybersecurity law, personal information protection law, and data security law provide the legal foundation of data governance in China, but also still allow for broad discretion by the state. All right. In closing, there is so much that's mentioned here, but that was the key takeaway that I wanted to bring to you guys. Of course, there's this figure about, there's, all these different areas of where this is going to apply to. But you're welcome to nerd it out if you choose to do so. To be honest, I don't know if anybody really would, but if you are that type of person, awesome. Check it out for yourself. There's a lot that's mentioned here, and it does mention numerous times in regards to the United States' position when it comes to DFFT. But if anything, what they're going to bring into the whole mix, it's not going to be called DFFT here when it gets actually written into our own framework, if you will. Last I checked, it was called something else. Can't remember exactly what that was, but we did bring it to you guys on the show about a week or two ago. Anyway, in closing, let me know what you guys think in regards to all this. I personally think it's a big deal, and it's a recent update in regards to DFFT. If you hold Jasmy and you understand the bigger picture of things, there's great opportunities because of the prices of where we're currently at. There'll be a time and day that will come sooner than you think, right? And that is, we'll look back and say to ourselves, man, oh man, I wish I would have loaded up on, for instance, Jasmy, because you know what? They did have some big connections You know, they end up being like, for instance, the chosen one when it came to some of these big things that were mentioned all the way back in August of 2023 with that guy who wears that funky hat. But whatever the case be, not financial advice. Do more of your own research and draw your own conclusion. This is part of our lock and load segment. And for me personally, yeah, I'm looking to add more to my Jasmy position. Even though I hit my goals, I can't deny that, the recent prices, I look at it as a blessing in disguise, basically. Some people who aren't in the know, they're going to flood it. They're not going to understand it. They won't even bother to do the proper research. The research that we showed you here speaks for itself. How do you tie it into everything? Pretty simple if you take the moment or time to look more into some of these key things. So that concludes our Jasmine coverage for tonight.